the Rangers Journal now.
Good evening, I'm David Tomney here with the Rangers Journal, and this is our live podcast on Wednesday, 14th of August. And we're here to discuss the game last night against Dynamo Kiev in the Champions League qualifying rounds. And I'm joined tonight by a brilliant panel. Come to you first, Ricky. How are you? How are you this evening, mate? Nice to see you.
Had a kind of miserable day. I was just saying offline here to yourself, Tom. Thank God I live down in England, because God knows how you guys are feeling, having to go to work up there after that sort of a performance last on. Not as much performance, but the result and basically the downside of that result. And we'll obviously talk about that as we go through the pod. But yeah, I'm looking forward to tonight. I think it'll be hopefully constructive and not too much of a battering, but I've got a feeling it's going to be a bit of a battering. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it, Tom.
Okay. Again, welcome to you as well, Dave. How are we today? You okay?
Yeah, I think Ricky summed it up quite nicely. Wee bit scunnered. I was probably quite lucky. Obviously, I am up north, but I work from home, so didn't have to face the office today, thank God.
And Gary, how are we? You okay, mate?
Yeah, I'm not too bad. A little bit subdued, much like the Rangers fans at Hampden last night. It was a little bit quiet. It was a little bit apathetic throughout the game, and that's continued into today. So a little bit disillusioned is probably the best way to put it, as it seems to be part of the course just now. So hopefully there's some interesting things. Not sure it'll be enjoyable, as Ricky says, but there'll be some interesting stuff as we go over the next 45 minutes or so.
Yeah, most definitely. And just for everyone watching, we've got Gary the ref coming on round about 7 p.m. to discuss some of the decisions last night. So if there is anything you want to talk about regarding that, save your comments until he comes on, and we'll try and get them up. But please engage in the comments, and we will get comments up, discuss the points. So I guess we'll just start from the beginning. Playing at Hampden against Dynamo Kiev, 1-1 in the first leg. Feeling fairly confident going into the game, I think. Starting lineup: Butland, Tavernier, Suter, Proper, Ridvan, Diamandi, Connor Barron, Tom Lawrence, Yefty out on the left, McCausland on the right, and Dessers up front. Ricky, I'll come to you first. Was there any surprises in that team? Was there anyone you thought might have started that didn't, or do you think it was what you thought it might be?
Well, it's near as what I thought it might be. Nothing can surprise me anymore with Clement at the moment. I think he's doesn't know what his best 11 is through whatever reasons. Danilo's another kind of example of that. It's just very bizarre where we are with that particular lad. But for me, I would have started with Tierney to start rather than McCausland, because he finished the game extremely well in Lebanon last week. Had a game at the weekend. So he's got legs in his minutes in his legs. And also I was like to have seen Sterling start the game, although when he did come on, we'll talk about it later on, he was totally lost in there. We were down to sort of a 10 men. But I'd prefer to see him start alongside Young Bannon, and Diomande played further forward, linking up the play, hopefully, with Dessers, because Dessers, in isolation, he cannot offer anything. He's not good enough. That's the way I see Dessers. So, but as far as the team's concerned, Tom, no major surprises at all, apart from the two that I just mentioned that I'd much prefer to have seen start.
Yeah, you make a couple of good points there, Ricky. Dave, what about yourself? Any surprises, or do you agree with what Ricky says? Would you have changed anything, or were you happy with that starting lineup?
Yeah, I didn't really envisage Sterling starting that one. I thought, he's still working his way back a bit, and he is a very good option to come on and control the game. I think, same as Ricky, my only real surprise was seeing McCausland start in front of Tierney. Now, I know Clement kind of came out and said that, he'd had advice from medical professionals, but if he was going to play 45 minutes, surely he could have played either 45 minutes. And I would argue that actually there's probably a greater risk in bringing him on in the second half, because yeah, you've got your 45 minutes, but if that game had gone differently, you're potentially looking at extra time as well. So actually, he could have ended up playing more minutes by coming on for that second half than he would have just from the off. Outside of that, I've seen a lot of folk giving him stick on social media for the team he picked. I'm just not seeing it. I think if you'd asked everyone before that game, as I said, with the exception of Journey from McCausland, potentially Sterling coming into the middle somewhere for one of those, then what other team would you have picked? You know, that is basically the team that everyone was predicting on social media before the game. That's what he picked. And yeah, okay, in hindsight, things didn't work. But I think going into that, absolutely, that pretty much was what I was expecting to see. And I would just argued that it was our strongest team as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair, Dave. Gary, same questions. Again, Dave makes a point there. What else do we have? What else do we have to put in there? You know, you can maybe change Lawrence, like you say, for Sterling. Cherney, as I say, Dave makes a great point. If he's been advised 45 minutes, he could potentially have played an extra 30 minutes extra time. So then, is he then getting subbed off at 90 minutes for someone else to come on? What's your thoughts on the starting lineup?
I think that's a great point. Dave says actually about the potential for having to go into extra time and penalties and stuff like that. Could have been a risk to his fitness. Hadn't actually considered that. I think the team, you know, walking up to the game, there wasn't consternation about the team. People were quite content with it. The only change would have been Cherney starting rather than coming off the bench. The fact that he didn't start meant we all knew he was going to come off the bench, whether that be half time or after 60 minutes. So I don't think there was a lot of gripes about the team. I think that there's not a lot of depth in the background you look to bring in. I mean, who else is going to play? You know, people talk a lot about Sterling, but where would he play in that team at the moment? And he's still coming up to fitness himself. You know, unless you were going to go with a flat midfield three, you probably need to get used to the fact that he's not doing that. That's not what he wants to do. You know, that's not going to change. He's made it abundantly clear that's not the style he's looking to play. So there wasn't really anything else you would bring in. I mean, the ones that are playing, who's that? We've got Dessers, Lawrence, Diamande, Barron, Tav has played pretty much Suter, has played every game. Pretty much Suter, not take Suter out of the equation. Those five. Who else could come in for them? Very few players. There's not really any backup until we get a bit more depth. Or bring some of the younger players. You don't have anything else to replace it with.
Yeah, no, from my point of view, I totally agree with what you're saying. I mean, we're saying Sterling could possibly come in for maybe Lawrence, but if Lawrence is the best we've got there and we're playing this number 10 role, Lawrence is the best we've got there, I think we're struggling, to be honest. And I said it last season, no harm to Lawrence, but I just don't think he's got the legs anymore. He just really seems as though his legs have gone, and he's contributed nothing to the games so far this season. Another one is Yefty out on the left. The guy's a left back, and he's looking like our best option as a left winger / left forward. Real concerns. So we start off the game. What was your initial thoughts, Ricky, to how we started the game? How do you think we started, got in about Dynamo Kiev?
I think the game went the same as everybody thought it was going to go. It was always going to be tight. It was never going to be a game where we were going to dominate or they were going to dominate. It was going to be the odd chance, the odd mistake. It was going to cost, the opposition a goal. That was the way we saw it. And up to the sort of the half time, that's exactly how it panned out. I don't think Butland made a single save. As I recall, I don't even think their keeper made this. I think he maybe had the one save. But I mean, it was so tight, cat and mouse sort of a game. Nobody wanted to concede. So come half time, I was quite happy. You know, I thought we were in the game. Second half to go, where we still had our better players for me still to come on. Cherney still to come on. Sterling still to come on to provide that drive in the middle of the park. So I was quite optimistic that we'd go into the second half and win, not steal the game, but win the game. But clearly the sending off, talk about that later on, but that's killed us. That's killed us, Tom.
Yeah, Dave, what was your thoughts on the start and how we went about it?
Yeah, I thought we started quite brightly actually the first few minutes. It was quite good seeing the high press again. That has been sorely missing for a wee while. The fact, all right, we weren't winning it every time, but we were making a good attempt at it. We looked to have a wee bit of structure about us, which we all can say has been missing up until now. So I thought it was okay. We did a really good job of containing them, I would say. I think from memory, they had two pretty good balls across the face of goal. Could have been dangerous if, they had someone in the right place. But outside of that, I don't remember an awful lot of them. So I think we did a good job of containing them. I think the problems are exactly what we already know. It's the lack of quality in that final third. And as much as we were keeping the ball quite well, winning it back quite well, we didn't truly look dangerous up top, I would say. Even the McCausland attempt that the keeper did have to save that Ricky mentioned, for all it looked promising, he then cut back and shot from the edge of the box directly at the keeper. So, I'm not knocking the boy, there's a lot of players around him, but I don't think we carved out any kind of great chances either, if that makes sense. And it was very kind of back and forward, very cagey. It was almost like we were feeling each other out a bit. It's kind of like a first leg in that respect. Um, so I think we're okay. I think we definitely had them contained, but again, it's just highlighting that dearth of quality when it comes to the forward line.
And Gary, do you think we look a little bit better with our shape defensively in that first half? Like Suter and Proper together, Diamandi and Barron together, getting those little partnerships going. Do you think that started to look a little bit better, a little bit more solid, or what was your thoughts behind that?
Yeah, it's always tricky. So I was at the game, so I was up in the south stand. So you're looking down on the pitch, so you've got different views than I've seen through replays, etc. So I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. Certainly, first half it was quite interesting because Kiev pushed up man for man, but didn't press us. If that makes any sense. Watching the game, so they kind of held us from actually going anywhere a lot of time. So we did look to kind of pass the ball side to side a lot. I don't know if it looked like that on the TV, but there was certainly a lot of side to side passing. Until you eventually opened up a space for Ridvan or Hefty or Tav and McCausland. That seemed to be the most of the first half hour anyway. As Dave says, they didn't have any real opportunities. Two balls across the box. One was that, I can't remember the boy's name. Was it Karabayev? And I think he was the best player in the park. And I think he played right back, did he not? In the first game, if I remember, it was the same boy that I was thinking of. And was excellent. He was good. He was quick. He created a bit of danger. But other than that, they looked to contain us. If I recall, and I may be wrong, we had a number of good balls in the box. From Hefty had a header that was just by the post. There was a few others, the McCausland effort. So, although it was quite a cagey first half, we were in the ascendancy. I think my worry was that it was quite slow paced. It was quite lethargic. It seemed. I did say at the very start of this pod here that it felt a bit less friendly. This is quite terrible to say, but sitting at the game, the atmosphere was lacking. There's a bit of disillusionment. It didn't feel like a European night at Ibrox, and I think that's possibly the biggest thing that I'll say about the whole game. I think that it did not feel like we were driving to win a European game at Ibrox next year in the Champions League. It felt like a game whereby you weren't really. There was nothing at stake. There was no real fight to it, and it was really. And I mean, everybody that get around. That only happened when we went 10 men down to 10 men. That the atmosphere actually went kicked in. Before that, there was a lot of lethargy, both on the park and off it.
I'll stick with you on that point actually, Gary, because it is an interesting one. Obviously, I watched it on the television, and the atmosphere felt flat from watching it on the telly. I don't know what the official attendance was, but looking at it, there was obviously large gaps in the stadium. I seen on Rangers pages during the day. Lots of people selling their tickets. What to you was the main difference between there and at Ibrox? Is it just how far away the stands are, the fans are away from the pitch? What in your opinion is is that main difference?
So I think there's a number of things. When I was there with my daughter, so one of the things we said in the way up the road, it's not home. You know, it's very simply, it's not your home. You know, you don't really have that same connection to it when you're there. It's also obviously the stadium is designed differently. You don't get the same people round about you. All the sort of stuff that makes Ibrox the place that you go to when you're there. So there's all that missing. And I think because we are in a situation whereby there is that level of apathy and disillusionment and I suppose frustration. When I say the atmosphere was poor, you know, I think I put on our group chat 10, 15 minutes before the game, there was lucky if there was 20,000 people in at that point in time. And I think at best it got to 30, 35,000. And it didn't really kick in at all in atmosphere. And I think that was partly because the game was quite slow, but more to do with the fact that people weren't engaged. And that's the biggest worry when we talk about some of this as the week goes on, the lack of what feels like engagement with the club.
Yeah, definitely. I say watching it on the television, you certainly notice the difference in the atmosphere. Ricky, as the game sort of went on in that first half, we had a half chance really with a hefty header. Tavernier, good ball into the box, and he's came in around the back post. Dessers, I know you'll disagree. I thought his hold up play in the first half and some of his layoffs were excellent. My biggest criticism of him last season was that he wasn't doing enough of that. But we just didn't seem to have much runners from midfield. What was your take on the hefty header? And then there was obviously McCausland. He had a chance later on in the half that maybe he could have done better with.
Yeah. Tav put in several good crosses last night. The Jeffy head, I mean, the boy was up really, really well, probably up above the ball, maybe trying to header it down, but he obviously missed the flight of the ball and he headed it down beyond the goal. So it wasn't even on target. But if I could pick you up in your Dessers point, Tommel, and with Lawrence, when Dave was talking about earlier on with the high press when we're starting, not everybody's pressing. Lawrence, well, he hasn't got the legs anymore to be. Now, I've said many times that Hadji might not have the pace, the quick pace, but he's got the legs to be that number 10 link in the play. Lawrence can't do it. He's now finished as a player, as far as I'm concerned. For him to be the man who's trying to get Dessers into a game, Dessers is not Morelos. Dessers cannot play that single role on his own. He's got not. I don't know what his best attribute is, apart from being a nice guy. You know, he can't turn a man. He's got no pace to run in behind a man. He can't hold the play up. He was diving about last night looking for tackles. It weren't tackles. That's not a Rangers striker. If we're going to continue with Dessers, and we have to be blunt about this, we are in for a bad season. Dessers is not the answer, and people need to get, as far as I'm concerned, and I'm not the only one. I was down in the club last night watching the game, and every one of us to a man, but just in disbelief at just how poor Dessers is as a football player. I mean, I've got some stats here. I mean, just the figures he's on. That's the only reason why he's staying with that nice attitude. And I mean, nobody can argue with the lad. His work rate's good, and that's probably his main attribute. He takes a lot of stick from a lot of fans, and he still comes back smiling. Although, you know, by all accounts, he was giving some fan stick last night. But he just isn't good enough. And for us to accept that as Rangers fans, I'm sorry, I ain't going to accept it. He isn't good enough to be our main striker. The Rangers board need to back the manager to get somebody in to replace him. Dessers can stay as a number 2, number 3 striker, but he cannot be our main man. We had a wee chat today in the group chat. If you're going to play Dessers constantly, you need to support him quicker and either go with a 4-4-2. Because if Dessers hasn't got a partner, he's totally lost and he does not bring anything to the play. And we're just losing the ball because he can't hold it up. He's not Morelos. He's not good enough. You know, I'm ranting. I know, and I'm sorry about that, but he's just not good enough to be our main striker.
Okay, so I mean, just playing devil's advocate here, Ricky. He's scored 20 odd goals last season. We aren't getting goals from anywhere else. Who replaces him? Who replaces him?
Well, we're meant to be in the middle of a rebuild here. Now, Beale brought in Dessers and brought in Danilo. Gio brought in Lawrence, Matondo, Yilmaz, Davis, all players who are not contributing. You add Cantwell, Hadji and Taft to that, all their wages are over £200,000 a week. None of them are contributing. None of them. £10.5 million a season we're paying those players I just mentioned in wages. That's the reason why we're not progressing. We're getting stifled by players who basically we need to get rid of before we can bring in better quality players. And if we keep on continuing, as I say, with Dessers, it's just a waste of time. A waste of time. £6 million Danilo. Why are we not being told by Clement or the Rangers board what's wrong with Danilo? £6 million Bill paid for him, and not once have we seen him through pre-season. He's on a bench, so that says is he fit? He must be fit to be on the bench. We're getting led up a garden path with this board who really need to get their fingers out and start being honest with the punters. Because as Gary said last night, there is reasons why Hampden, the road network, the rail network, trying to get back home when the game finishes, all that kind of stuff, adds to people not going to, and that's understandable. But if this continues the way it is, then Hampden will end up with £20,000 in it until we get back to Ibrox, 20,000 the crowd, sorry, until we get back to Ibrox. Because the fans will just vote by their feet, in my opinion.
No, it's a fair point. And as I say, we've got a pod coming up tomorrow night about the board. So we've got comments on that. Obviously, Ricky, we'll hear about them tomorrow. But I totally understand your frustration. So I just want to welcome the other Gary on. He's joined us. How are you this evening? You all right, Gary?
Yeah, good, Tomo. Evening, chaps. How you doing?
Evening.
Excellent. We're just getting towards...
Sorry, Tom. I was just going to say, don't get two Garys on anywhere. This is unique. You know, phone extinct. You don't often see two.
I think you're the only two Garys left in the British Isles, aren't you? Got them both here. Gary, we're just summing up the first half here, and then we'll get to the points about the referee. You came on at a nice time actually, because I was going to come to Dave about Hefty and his first booking. Okay. What did you think of that one? It was out on the touchline. He's gone in a little bit late on Yarmolenko. Yeah. I think it was his first foul of the game, and he's been booked. What was your take on that?
Again, I think I spoke about it before on here. It's about context and consistency, right? So context of the game, is it a niggly game? Is it not a niggly game? Can you avoid the card, or do you have to give it? On its individual basis, I can see why it's given. I think he's trod on his foot. So I don't think you can have too many complaints on that individual instant. But it's when you see similar incidents going unpunished in other areas of the park where the consistency comes in. And I think that's what gets fans and players frustrated, rather than individual incidents getting punished. So I think it could be a yellow, but again, it didn't reflect his overall performance.
Yeah, and then we'll carry on. I think Hefty had a couple of other niggly challenges just before half-time. Then second half, 5 minutes in, he's obviously given the second yellow. Now, for me, it's not even a foul, never mind a yellow card. But do you think the referee gets one look at it, but do you think the referee is thinking about those other fouls? What sort of do you think's going through his head when that challenge has been made?
Well, I think you've made a good point, because he did have a couple of niggly ones, nothing worthy of a yellow, but it's a totting up. And then I was in the first half, I think there was a free kick to Kiev, and Hefty was in the wall, and he's arguing with the ref, and the ref keeps telling him, be quiet, and he's giving them the old thumbs up kind of thing. So you don't know if that's sarcasm or genuine or what way the refs took it, but he's obviously thinking, right, this guy's starting to annoy me now. I'm going to be keeping an eye on him. So then when the incident happens in the second half, I agree with you, it's not even a foul. He's got up and he's kept his arms actually by his side quite unnaturally for jumping, I would say, in an effort not to collide with the defender. He's won the ball clean, he's just got up earlier, and it's never a foul. But I think the previous incidents have been in the back of the referee's head, and he's kind of rushed in had a rush of blood to the head and brandished the yellow and red without properly seeing it. Well, clearly he's not seen it, because I don't think he could justify a yellow or even a foul if he'd saw it properly.
So Aldo's made a comment there saying it's nonsense that VAR couldn't intervene.
Yeah.
Would you be able to just explain to people why it's a second yellow card, they say, VAR can't intervene on that. But would you be able to explain to people why, for such a huge decision, someone in the monitoring box can't say to the referee that, this is a big decision, I think you need to have a little look at that and before making it?
Yeah, the rationale behind the not reviewing second yellow cards is basically because if you take, for example, say Jeffrey's first one was justified and the second one wasn't, that gets reviewed and he gets away with the red card. But if you reverse that round and his first one was unfair, let's just say, and the second one was justified, you've then got to go back and review something that could have happened half an hour, 40 minutes beforehand. So there would be a level playing field because it would only be the second yellow card being reviewed. No, I do agree the jeopardy of it is too high to just ignore it when we've got this technology here. So my solution to it would have been have all the yellow cards in the game clipped and available just to bring up to the VAR. Don't necessarily review it at the time, but in the event of a second yellow card and a red card, then go back and review both. If either are unjustified, then one of them's knocked off, effectively. I agree with you. It's just the stakes are too high when someone's receiving a red card, and it could be a completely wrong decision, as Rangers saw last night, unfortunately.
I mean, you look at it, it's in the context of the game, it's a red card that obviously changes how the game is going to be played. I mean, up to that point, but we're fairly comfortable. But beyond that, it potentially says it's cost us £5 million to then go out and strengthen our team, which then impacts on the league. So I say it's a massive decision to be basically guessed on. We'll come to some other decisions. The referee in the first half, he's booked Diomande as well, where I think it was he's ran into the back of a Kiev player. But then there was things that Kiev players were doing. There's one that I recall, Diomande's away from him, and the Kiev players got a handful of his jersey, pulling him back, and Diomande got the ball away, so I'm guessing that's why there was no booking. But would you explain a little bit about why something might be a booking and that example I've just given you?
I think with the one you're talking about, I remember it was in the middle of the park. I think it was the number 29 or 39 of Kiev. I can't remember. I was watching it on TV, so I was kind of restricted to what the cameras were showing. But like you say, he's pulled back Diomande. The referee's ready to give the foul, but Diomande breaks loose, and I think he plays out to Ross McCausland. The referee plays advantage, fine, and I think a good attempt actually came from it. There was a good chance developed, which is all fine. That's what the referee should do. But when the play next stops, he's got a decision: is he going to go back and book him or not? I think why he's not booked him is because in our sort of booking classifications, it would be down as interfering or preventing a promising attack out with the penalty area. That's a specific offence for like a cynical foul, if you like, on a counter-attack. But there's also the shirt pulling, and it has interfered with a promising attack, because if you watch it back, I think the ball was originally going to go out to the left wing, and their right back was exposed or out of position. So by him pulling back, he's caused them to change direction and done it. So I still think it's interfered with a promising attack, albeit the attack has still regained a bit of momentum, but it's lost that initial momentum, and basically Kiev player's done what he's intended to do. So I think that's, as a referee, you want to set a benchmark that's not going to be tolerated, especially if midfielders with these kind of grappling is going to happen quite a lot during the game. And specifically when he was being particularly harsh on Rangers players, I think he's got to do the same. He's got to hold the same standard for Kiev, and it just didn't seem to happen. It was very inconsistent.
Yeah, I mean, I'll come to Dave. You've made a point there, Gary, that I was going to bring up, but it certainly seemed to me that Rangers were getting punished more than what the Kiev players were. What's your thoughts around that? Do you agree, disagree? How was your viewing of that?
No, so to be fair with you, Tom, I'd agree completely, mate. It was, so I think it was just a few minutes after that first hefty booking, which, as Gary said, it's probably one of these, as fans will all be sat there going, no, you can't give that. But the reality is you can totally understand why ref gave it. Then it was just a couple of minutes later, I remember one of their players doing exactly the same thing to one of ours. And it was just kind of waved away and play went on. And I think, as we've said, okay, you might have a particularly harsh ref, and like most things in life, you get some that are stricter than others. That's okay as long as it's consistent. But when you're getting hammered, your first dodgy tackle, someone else does exactly the same and they're not, then you can absolutely understand why fans are getting a bit upset at that point.
Yeah. And Gary, the ref, the other thing that sort of winds me up is the way the Kiev players were going down, holding their faces. Now, I totally understand the head injuries, etc. If it was a clash of heads, someone's kicked in the head, game's got to be stopped. But as a referee, when you see maybe a flailing hand, I think McCausland got caught with one in the first half on a Kiev player, and he's brushed the guy's face.
Yeah.
And the referees gave a free kick, but on a couple of other occasions, a brush of a hand on the face isn't going to cause concussion, serious brain damage, etc. Where do referees stand on? I'm just going to let this go because this player is at it, or is it a case of we have to stop the game because they're down holding their face, holding their head?
To be honest, it's a bit of a grey area, mate. We're obviously not doctors or medical professionals, so I'd say the ref was very naive to a lot of stuff Kiev done last night, because as a referee, particularly in a high-profile game like that, you'd hope he's done his homework. What's likely to be the tactics of both teams? Kiev are probably going to sit in a little bit, try and kill the clock and nip stuff on the counter-attack. So their game plan is always going to be to kind of break momentum, if you like. So unofficially in Scotland, we kind of get a little bit of guidance saying if someone's down holding their head and you think they're at it essentially to try and just stop the game, give it a few seconds and let play continue. Because generally, if it's a counter-attacking situation, like say the McCausland one, if the player's worried that his team's going to concede, he'll quickly bounce back up. So you just give it a few seconds, not just let the game continue. If he stays down, then I think you've no choice but to stop it. However, falling for every time, what he done last night, I think he fell for every time a Kiev player went down. And you can tell if there's been head contact. So the Jeffrey second yellow, for example, the player's down holding his head. The referee can't make a judgment call that's not impacted his head. But like you said, in the McCausland one, there's a couple other ones as well. I can't remember the specifics, but I remember watching during the game where there's no chance the head has come in any contact whatsoever. It's been like a step on the ankle or something, and the player's down holding his face. You can absolutely play on during that because you've seen there's no contact with the head and the player's down. So I think it was very, very naive, and he was happy to buy a lot of the play acting from Kiev.
Yeah, I mean, there was one early on in the game when Suter cleared the ball and the Kiev player went down holding his head. I couldn't tell if there was any contact or not. But the ref actually played on for a good little bit. The ball ended up over back into the Kiev half before he actually blew up. And I thought at that point, oh, he's not going to be falling for this, Then unfortunately, that's how it went.
There's a common sort of little trick they do as well. See if the ball's bouncing around the penalty area and someone's down holding their head, they'll tend not to blow up straight away because the restart of the game is then a nightmare because you've got a drop ball situation in the penalty area and anything can happen. There'll be legs and kicks flying everywhere trying to get the ball clear, So what they'll tend to do is if someone's about to hook it clear, they'll delay it a few seconds till the ball's gone halfway and then blow the whistle, and it's an easy drop ball in a relatively neutral area.
Okay. One sort of last incident, there was a bit of a flare-up with Cherney and a couple of the Kiev players. Paul's asking about VAR not intervene when Cherney's been grabbed by the throat. Have you got any thoughts on that and able to answer, Paul?
Yeah, I've seen the still pictures. I didn't notice they'd actually grabbed him by the throat watching on TV at the time. What the kind of guidance is in those situations was a flare-up, because I think it's Cherney's ran over to the player that's down injured and shouted something or said something to him, and then either him or his teammates bounced up and the handbags have happened. In those scenarios, the sort of guidance to referees is both players get booked and anyone running a distance to get involved. So generally that can be like a goalkeeper. Like Alan McGregor would be a classic example in the past, running for miles to get involved. So, but in that scenario, I don't think chasing the yellow card for the player grabbing by the throat, because there's no violent force used there, if you know what I mean. It's hard to tell exactly how hard he's grabbing them, but it didn't look like particularly violent. So in that case, it'd be regards handbags, and both players would end up with a caution. There's no way the refs coming out of that just booking the Kiev player and letting Cherney away with kind of instigating it, if you like.
Okay, that's a good explanation. Thank you, Gary. Gents, has anyone got any other questions or anything to put to Gary while he's here? Any other incidents that you can think of?
So the only one I would say, and it's not really an incident, it's more an observation, as you said. You know, I mean, the referee struggled to manage the game from start to finish. You know, I think, and as you said, there was a number of instances whereby he was blown for certain things, not for others. And be honest, I mean, if you're being honest, some of those things went Rangers' favour at times as well. I think there was one towards the end when Proper goes through the back of, and I'm sure he'd been booked to make them wrong. So I'm looking at that thinking, you know, arguably you could have maybe went a bit harder on that. So I suppose my question is more about the selection process, you know, and presumably he's refereeing games in Serie A.
Yeah,
he's doing it well enough. I've seen lots of comments about he only knows how to use VAR or something like that. So how does that work in terms of how they're selected for a game like that?
There's different classifications within refs with FIFA badges. So each country's allocated certain amount of FIFA badges, and then it's up to them to kind of distribute them as they see fit. And then the individual refs will get observed on games, and then if there's any horrendous performances, they potentially get marked down and then stripped of it, and it's got to go to someone else within the association, that kind of thing. So the likes of your Anthony Taylors, Michael Olivers, they'll be the sort of cap ones of the FIFA refs. That's why they'll be doing the high level Champions League games. I'm not sure what last night would have come under, because it's technically still Champions League, but it's lower level qualifiers, so he's probably not in that top one grade. But again, he's refereeing Serie A every week, so he's going to be involved in with some big teams, AC Milan, Inter Milan, Juventus kind of teams. So you'd like to think he's competent, but you know yourself, like watching domestic football, Scotland, England, or anywhere, there's some horrendous performances go in some weeks, and then it's kind of inexplicable. Sometimes it's the better refs, and sometimes it's the worst refs that the fans dislike or like. So I don't really know too much about this guy from last night, but last night's individual showing it was horrendous, and I believe there will be an observer in the game, but I believe the guy was English. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of score or mark or outcome comes from the game, because it was particularly poor. And there's another aspect that they kind of look at within the game as well, is like game management in terms of managing the players' behaviour, not just purely decision recognition. And I thought he got that all wrong last night as well. He was quite antagonistic towards anyone trying to ask him questions. Even Tavernier, a few times I told him the new rule this year is it should be only the captains talking and sort of contentious decisions. But even he was giving Tav the brush off a little bit as well. So I don't think his game management was good at all.
So just final thing here, really, from Paul. What sort of punishment, or what do you think UEFA would do with that performance last night? Does he get relegated to the Europa League? Might we see him in one of our games later on in the season, or what would happen after poor performances?
It would depend on the category of the match. So, for example, a Champions League qualifier might come under the same category as a Europa League group stage match, or vice versa. So it really depends. I don't think they get demoted in one poor performance. It'd be more a spate of performances, unless there was something particularly bad, like that could never be excused. Like obviously the red card was bad, but there's mitigation to an extent there. What I'm talking about is like awarding a goal where there's not been a goal scored or something like that, like really horrendous errors where one match is enough to get them binned, if you like. but it would have to be a sequence or chain of matches where he's been poor to get demotion.
Okay. Paul's wanting him sacked for gross misconduct, so I'll leave everyone to think about that one and
To
have
be
their
fair,
own thoughts
Tomo,
on
the
that.
boy's got form, is he not?
I believe so. I don't know too much about him, but I believe he's not been the best in Serie A. But as I say, I don't know too much, so I can't really comment on it, Dave. Anything else you'd like to bring up, Gary, from last night that you observed?
No, not particularly. I called it fairly early. I was on a group chat with a few friends that are referees and saying this guy's having a stinker. He's going to have to do something to turn us around a little bit. And I think it was midway through the first half. And it's a mixed group chat. There's Rangers, Celtic, Hearts, Hibs fans and all the rest on it. So, and they were all kind of laughing, saying it's not gone well so far. So you could see it coming a mile off. And personally, you shouldn't really have to adjust tactics to accommodate a referee having a bad one. But in reflection, hindsight, it's a wonderful thing. Obviously, maybe the best thing would have been Jeff coming off at half time. But
Yeah.
like you say,
that was certainly suggested by a couple of people in our group chat, saying, with him on a yellow, he might come off, and hindsight's a good thing, and maybe we should have done. Well, thank you for coming on, Gary. You're more welcome to stay for a little bit longer if you want, or if you've got other things to do.
A crying 13-month-old, I've got to go and give some dinner, mate. So I'm going to have to shut off.
As always, thank you for sparing your time, Gary, and giving us your views and explanations. It's always appreciated. So we'll speak to you next time.
All right, so guys, all the best. Take care.
Cheers, mate. Cheers. Take care. Bye bye. So we'll sort of whiz through the second half. After that red card, in my opinion, it just totally killed us. Ricky, after the red card, what was your hopes to see for the rest of the half? How did you want us to continue in that game to obviously get the best result we could?
Well, as Gary's already alluded to, the actual crowd got behind the team, and the team, for me, responded. Still nothing each. We sent off in the 55th minute, so there's still a long way to go. And we were in the game. There was chances, we still, although they were dominating, to be fair to them, with the extra man. But for me, what was the telling sort of a substitution was taking off Diomande, who I actually thought was played reasonably well. Him and Barron last night, he was safe enough, he didn't make too many mistakes. Anything he did do, he sort of recovered well. So when he was taken off, and I assume it was because he was on a yellow card, they didn't want him to go down to 10, the same as it happened with Jeffy, and they brought on Sterling. As I was saying earlier on, I was advocating for Sterling to start in the holding role alongside Barron. When he came on, or should I say, when Diomande went off, that's when we lost the game, because Diomande was in amongst the game. He was understanding the pace of the game. He had the number for the players round about him. Him and Barron were playing reasonably well. We were a man down, but playing reasonably well, as well as could be expected. But Sterling, for me, and I don't want to knock the lad too well, but he came on and he could not pick up the pace of the game. He was lost in there. He was lost. So Barron had no help, and that's when they really dominated it, and that's how they got the 2 goals. It was the taking off of Diomande, for me, that lost us the game. I can understand why he was taken off, because of the yellow card, but for me that was a critical point. And as soon as we lost the first, they were never getting back. It's just, Diomande, I think, it's just unfortunate. The reasons for going off, were understandable, but Sterling, just, it was almost been down to 9 men. He was totally lost in there.
Yeah, so Gary, coming to that, do you think that yellow card had a bearing on Diomande coming off? Because I would have had Lawrence off long before pretty much anyone else on the pitch, to be honest with you. But do you think that's had a bearing on Diomande coming off? And then when Sterling has come on, Ricky's, I think, called it right there, he's looked very, very sluggish. He didn't look like the same Sterling from last season. What are your thoughts on those?
Yeah, I think, just very, very briefly, go back to the Jeffy one. I think there is an argument which should be questioned, maybe why Clement didn't take him off. We knew, as Gary said, the referee was quite obvious he was fussing a lot of things. So there is maybe a question to ask about the sense of keeping them on second half. Even if he didn't go off then, do we honestly think he might have stayed on the rest of the game? He's quite an over-exuberant player. So as an aside, I think that's something that maybe didn't help us. Looking at Diamande, he was covering a lot of ground. He was tracking from the middle out to the left repeatedly once we went down to 10 men. So I think it was a combination of the booking, but also I think he was tired. I mean, you could see he was, and I think the first 3 games he played this season, he's probably been off after about 70 minutes anyway, isn't he? I'm trying to think. So the amount of work he does, he seems to go off. So I think it was a combination of tiredness, combination of the booking, obviously, would have put us in more trouble. Sterling, well, given the benefit of the doubt, he's still getting up to speed. He was on the left-hand side, which isn't his right side, but he didn't contribute to the game. He was lost in there. I think that he will play on Saturday, which will maybe help him get a bit of match sharpness, but he certainly didn't add any value for that last 20 minutes. And I think the funny thing was, if you remember the game, I'm pretty sure Diamande was in the box, kind of beating 1 or 2 people around about that, just about a minute or 2 before he went off. He was actually still doing good things when he got the ball, and there was a little bit surprised to see him taken off. So you can only assume there was a fitness issue as much as like you say, a booking issue. But that took away probably a large attacking outlet we had, driving with the ball.
Yeah, and Dave, second half we didn't really make much in front of goal, especially after we'd gone down to 10 men. I think Gary's mentioned it there. Gary's mentioned it about Diamande getting into the box. Couldn't really get a shot away. Tries to set up Dessers and unfortunately it comes to nothing. Then we concede 2 quick-fire goals, really. The first one, what was your take on the first goal that we conceded? Is it, decent goal, or poor defensively? Could have done a bit more.
Both, to be honest, mate. I mean, it was a well-taken goal for what it was, outside the box just. So, they always look nice flying in. Normally, if they're going the other way. Lawrence, jump over it. Why? Why at that range would you need to jump? I understand it if he's sort of 10, 15 yard away, but, he was right up in his face, and all he had to do was get the block in. He jumps over it. I think Sterling was again in the area, didn't kind of do much about it. In fairness, I think, as Gary said, he was poor last night, and that's okay. I don't think anyone doubts Sterling's work ethic, his tenaciousness normally. He had a bad night. It's very unfortunate it happened when it did, but it did. And I think, we have to be honest, he was poor. So I don't think he helped. But Lawrence, for me, that should have been blocked. Regardless of the fact it was, it was a good strike. The other one, and I mean, I'm sure I'll get plenty of pelters for this. I reckon Butland should have done a bit better with it as well, to be fair. I don't know if he was unsighted at all. I don't know if his defender blocking the initial shot, but I would have expected him to get down to that, to be honest, and at least get something on it, even if he couldn't save it. But the fact he didn't get it at all, bit of a concern.
And then after that goal, Ricky, there's still 10 minutes to go, and then we've put Proper up front pretty much straight away. Was that a surprise to you that we'd done that, or do you think the game's so late in the day that we've got to try something else? For me, if we're going to be putting anyone up front to fire the ball into it, probably would have been Suter if that was what we were looking at. But what are your thoughts on that, and just leaving that point? Unfortunately, Ridvan had gone off injured again. We got Ben Davies on, but we're left at the back with Suter, Davies, and I think Tav. Then Proper's up front. Then they've obviously came and scored a second goal on the breakaway.
Well, it's just panic stations because they nearly had to get something from the last sort of 10 minutes. So Proper being the tallest of the 2 defenders is probably the reason why he was the one that was chosen. I can only assume because of his sight crosses coming in. But during the game, it was concerning for me just how easy their wingers were getting by our fullbacks.
No, I don't think you're wrong there, Ricky, in what you're saying. The game then sort of just petered out after the second goal. Fans were leaving, and we ended up losing 2-0. I don't want to end this on too much of a down, sour note. So a positive for me, Gary, last night was Connor Barron. Especially the first half, I thought he showed a lot. He showed that he's got a good engine. He's getting about. He's wanting the ball. He's recycling it well. He wasn't a regular starter for Aberdeen, a mainstay in the team. I think the start he's had to his Rangers career has been promising. He will have dips in form. How do you see Connor Barron and his performance last night? Are you hopeful there, or are you going to take away my optimism?
Not at all. I think obviously the scattergun's out, and we're going to criticise everybody because that's what happens when we lose a big game and it's an important game and so forth. I don't actually think MD played badly, particularly yesterday. I don't think the majority of them played well. Don't get me wrong. I don't think if you're looking at how they played, I think most of them are pretty average. But they weren't poor by any stretch of the imagination. I think we'd all agree that if that decision hadn't went ahead, we were confident we were going to win the game. So I think there's a bit of context there. So I'm not sure it was as bad as maybe we're feeling at the moment in some cases. And I think, as Ricky said, we did a lot of good attacking play for that last half hour before the goal, considering we were down to 10 men. So in terms of Barron, he was probably our best player. He's probably been the best player for the 4 games we played. He's energetic. He gets about the pitch. His passing is developing. He looks to play forward, which is good, despite the fact he's playing quite deep. He looks to have a good link up with Diamande, and Diamande's obviously good on the kind of half turn or kind of driving through space. So they look like a good partnership. The worry is that he's a 21-year-old boy, that's here joined the new club, and we have very little to nothing to support him and Diamande. I think I said earlier on that be it Tav, be it Lawrence, be it Dessers, Diamande, guys, Barron, these guys are playing every week because we don't have enough quality to bring in and replace them and give them an opportunity. That's the worry, is it'll tire very quickly. Maybe it's a good thing we don't have a playoff to play another 2 games over the next couple of weeks. Maybe there's a positive for you, Tom.
Yeah, definitely, most definitely. So as I say, that finished our participation in the Champions League this season. We do drop into the Europa League now. which with its new format, I believe we play 8 games, which go up to the end of January. So to compete, or even just to play on all fronts, we are going to need more bodies in, because you just look at last night, Ridvan's looks like it's going to be a long-term injury by the way he went off. So we've got at left back Yefty, who's just signed, and Robbie Fraser. So we're in midfield. Raskin's been out injured. Who have we then got? It's, as I say, it's a bit of a mess at the moment, and where we go from here, who knows? So we'll wrap up this pod looking at the game from last night. So just before we go, I'll come to Ricky. Any final thoughts before we go, Ricky? Anything you want to say?
No, just thanks for your company tonight, guys. I've enjoyed it. Sorry, been a bit of a sort of a miserable get here, but it's just, you know, I love my club, and I'm just very down sort of hearted about just the direction of. I think it's the amount of money that these guys are earning on a weekly basis and not contributing to what they're getting paid. And it's not just the odd individual like Tav. I like Tav as a player. I just think he's finished now. We can carry Tav if the other 10, but there's maybe 6, 7 big earners just not, and we can't afford to carry that amount in a team if we want to be successful. I have got high hopes for the people that still want to come back. I think young McCausland is going to be an asset to us as he gets older. You know, it's not all doom and gloom. Big Proper will be a decent centre half. I think I liked the Gio last night, Diomande. Sorry, I thought he played well with Barron last night, and they're starting to get a partnership. I also like Raskin. Now when he's back fit, you know, he's another player that can go in there and assist him. And as you mentioned, Tomo, going forward, you know, with all these different games, we'll have enough legs in there to sort of a chop and change the team, but not lose too much quality. We just cannot afford to have these players who are good players on the sidelines injured constantly. Many 2 seasons now, 3 seasons now, we just constantly have a whole team out injured, don't we? When's it going to stop? And so there is hope, there is optimism there. We just need to try and get 1 or 2 players in, and certainly 1 or 2 out the door before the window closes.
Yeah, no, totally agree, Ricky. I think it's going to get. It's going to get a bit worse before it gets better. I've got to be brutally honest. But yeah, thank you for your contribution this evening. It's been good talking to you. Dave, any final words from yourself before we wrap up?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I guess for me, it's the next 2 weeks are key now. You know, we know where we are now. There's no any dubiety about whether we're budgeting Champions League, Europa League, etc. So, you know, big couple of weeks for the club in the transfer market and trying to shift some of the deadwood that Ricky's mentioned on. You know, obviously, I can't imagine we're getting rid of Oldham in one window, but I think there has to be some moves. Otherwise, it's going to be a bloody long season, mate. No,
totally agree. And once again, thank you, Dave, for coming on and contributing this evening. It's been good speaking to you. And finally, the other Gary that's left in Britain. Any final thoughts before we finish, mate?
Yeah, I was just thinking there, you know, you wonder if the only position we have any depth in it is in left back. We've got 3 players, and if that's because we knew Ridvan would only last a couple of weeks before he got injured. Makes you wonder. You know, I suppose it's important not to get too high when things are good, not to get too low when things are bad. We've got a couple of games, you know, you win them, you went to the Celtic game, a couple of new signings, Hadji and Campbell, and much like Ricky, I'd like Hadji to stay, but clearly he's not going to, it looks like. But we'll get them out, get a few players in, things can move on quickly. You know, to finish a positive of the year, we get put out by, was it Malmo? We went to the Europa League final. Thank you. And I'm sure the pod was the same that week.
Yeah, no, I like it. And I think you made a good point there, Gary. I think we need to sort of be level-headed. You know, we win a couple of games where we're not the best team in the world, but if we lose a couple of games as well, we're not the worst team in the world. So I think you make a good point there. I just want to say thank you to everyone that's been on this evening. Thank you for everyone in the comments. It means a lot engaging with us. The Journal is almost 6 months old on the podcast, and we're nearly up to 2,000 subscribers. So any Rangers fans that aren't subscribing, why not get subscribing, get liking the page. We've got podcast coming up tomorrow. Scotty's going to be talking about the board. Then on Friday evening, we're going to be previewing the St Johnstone game on Saturday. There's also been a couple of pods this week where I've interviewed the gentleman from the Rangers archive. If you've not watched it, go and have a look. They do some great work and deserve to be acknowledged. So just want to say once again, thank you for everyone for coming on, everyone interacting in the comments. And remember, every night is a Rangers Journal night. Good night.